Again, to Let's Talk Forensics with Pastor Dan. We're looking at another field of blood analysis, and this is a really big one. The entire departments of forensics are set up just for this area, toxicology. Toxicology right there. Toxicology is defined as the study of poisons, drugs or poisons found in the body as they relate to criminal law. So when we look at the body, we're going to examine what is in the body, what may have caused a person to get sick and or die, and therefore being able to identify what would be a possible cause of death. Now, most readily abused drug. What is the number one drug abused in the United States? And I think somebody might think cocaine, fentanyl, things along those lines. All that is true, but those are not the most readily abused. The most readily abused drug is alcohol. Now, how do we test for the presence of alcohol? We use something called a breathalyzer. I'm going to pull a video up over, not video, but all I'm going to do is just show the picture. It's a rather long video, and I don't want to go through all that. What we have here is a IR, infrared light source, that enters a chamber. And from one end to the other, if there's no bending of light, if it's all completely, then we consider that 0%. Person breathes into it. If there is alcohol present, it causes the light to bend slightly. As that light bends slightly, we can determine how much alcohol is present. Now, this other lens focuses it down, but we have what's called a filter wheel here. This filter wheel negates certain commonly known sources that could cause a false positive, like mouthwash, like cough syrup. So if people are taking that at a regular level, we don't want them to be flagged as having been drunk. So therefore, those take care of those. It then hits a sensor. That's this little thing here, a photo sensor, and it goes to a computer, which then identifies it in that way. Now, let's be a little more specific on the process. Just write it down for you. First thing happened, a sample with no alcohol is taken. So we get what's called a blank. So we know what 0 looks like. The suspect then breathes into it, and the amount of light is measured against what it was before. A ratio is calculated as to the percentage of alcohol present. Now, is a breathalyzer perfect? No, you can get false positives. So what would you do instead? What is better? A blood test. So if I take a blood draw out, I can then identify exactly what percentage of alcohol is in the bloodstream. And again, the reason why we have alcohol, because alcohol goes to the brain. It then replaces the water in the brain, which causes you to get the intoxication and lack of mental judgment. Now, what is the legal limit for intoxication? The answer to that is it basically depends. For most people across the United States, non-commercial drivers over 21, 0.08 is the legal limit of intoxication. Now, for commercial drivers, so for truck drivers, for regular motor coach operators, it's 0.04. It's lower. Why? Because you're dealing with a large vehicle, and they have to be able to be mentally aware. They don't want to have any chance of not being able to stop on time, so therefore it's even low. Now, there is a rate that's even less than that. If you're a school bus driver, or if you're under the age of 21, it's 0.02. At 0.02, that's any alcohol. If you have one drink, you're going to blow 0.02. So therefore, because bus drivers are driving school kids, we don't want them drinking at all. And of course, it's illegal under the age of 21 for anyone to drink. So therefore, they shouldn't be driving at all with alcohol in the system. Now, what happens if you refuse to submit? Can you refuse? Yes, you can refuse. But immediately, if you refuse, most states, you will lose your license for at least 6 months because you've refused the breathalyzer. And then you are forced to submit to a field sobriety test. Those are things like touch your nose, stand on your 1 foot, say the alphabet, because that way if you're thinking 2 things, walk a straight line. Those things along those lines are things we call the field sobriety test. Now, Tests done to test for other drugs and poisons. We had mentioned before acid base when we talked about phenolphthalein. We talked about acid base. The main reason is that human blood should be acid base measures pH, measure of acidity is a definition of pH. Human blood should be between 9.35 and 9.45. If it's anything outside of that, there's something. That's 7.35. Sorry about that. The system that shifted that blood pH level, and we have to identify what that is. Now, what can be tested for toxicological examination? We said blood, okay? Other thing, urine, okay? Common blood tests for drugs, they'll take a urine sample, okay? Because it's inside the body, coming out, we can test it that way. Vitreal humor, that's a fluid in the eyeball. Now I think, oh, that's gross. Why would they take, this is usually done by a coroner. If the person's dead, pop the syringe in, pull the fluid out. Again, you're going, oh, person's dead. I'm pretty sure they don't need the fluid in their eyeball anyway. All right. Next thing we can also look at is hair. Now, hair is really, really cool because what it does, it can measure the exact duration of interaction with toxins. So I can tell you how long ago you were exposed to toxins and what toxins were present due to that exposure. We'll talk about all this stuff when we talk about trace analysis. The hair grows at a certain length, and based on where things are at and how much of the hair it takes up, we can also identify stuff like pollens in the body based on it. A lot of really cool things. All right. Now, how do we test it? Goes back to our old friend, the GC, the gas chromatograph. So we run it through a cycle, through a tube, chromatography, separation of the chemicals, how long it takes to get there, the mass spec will identify what quantity is present, how much is inside of there, things along those lines. And then we're testing for other poisons. Drugs, okay? Heavy metals. Often when you have heavy metals, you'll see a lining in the gums, like lead will generate various linings in the gums. And then carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, when you have so many exposure, I had somebody that had a high level of carbon monoxide and the pink cheeks turned very, very pink as a result. So things that we can also test inside the body, things along that way. And with that, we're done. Hopefully it's not too bad. Take care. God bless. Bye.